I resisted with my left hand, and I looked down and I felt my arm come up and get free, and I looked down and saw that the body had just ripped the strap. And that's when it hit me that what I was watching
Was you?
was me. And
Oh my gosh.
and when that happened, just like fear, negative thoughts came in, like, you idiot, you've been dead this whole time, you didn't even know. It felt like all these dark forces actually started to come and smother me.
Wow.
And as they were getting closer and closer, and I felt like my light, who I was going to be put out. As it was happening, I felt this warmth all of a sudden start on my back.
Welcome to Stories of Hope in Hard Times, the show that explores how people endure and even thrive in difficult times, all with God's help. I'm your host, Tamara K. Anderson. Join me on a journey to find inspiring stories of hope and wisdom learned in life's hardest moments.
My guest today was born in Texas and raised in California and Utah. As an adult, he has lived in Asia and traveled the world, including he has lived in 30 states of the United States, which is crazy. He used to work in TV, including on the staff of Touched by an Angel. He was also a production assistant to several A-name movies. He's happily married and has been for 18 years and has 2 crazy but amazing kids. I'm pleased to present Vinney Todd. Vinney, are you ready to share your story of hope?
I guess so.
So Vinney and I are at an author's retreat together, and I figured I'd just snag him while we were here and chat for a little bit, which is awesome. But I have to ask you a little bit about these 30 states that you've lived in. Oh my word. Seriously.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
I have some favorites amongst them, for sure.
Please do tell me. Which are your favorites?
Now, I never got to work in Hawaii, but I got to go stay there for a couple weeks when I was younger, and I did love Hawaii.
Did you?
It was really awesome. Yeah. It's a special spot in my mind.
Yeah.
But I also did love Texas, a couple places in Texas, and of course I was born there, so I gotta love Texas.
Yes, you got it.
But in Northern California, I worked in Ventura for quite a while, and if it wasn't for the traffic, I would love that so much. It was so beautiful. I lived
in Ventura for a while.
You did?
Yeah, in Ventura County. Awesome. Yeah, I had 2 kids born there. So, hey, we have something else in common. This is great.
But I worked in Malibu, and it was a short little jaunt, maybe 8 miles, but it would take almost an hour every day. So,
at least. Depending upon traffic, as they say in California, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, I have a lot of favorite states, though. Amongst them, I have a lot of favorites.
That is awesome. So today, I am so excited to interview Vinney. He's been on my list of people to interview since I started the podcast, ironically. I'm finally getting around to it now. And the reason is because Vinney had a near-death experience. Well, you died. Mm-hmm. You've actually died twice.
Twice, yeah.
So he's going to talk to us a little bit today about that experience and the things that he learned that I think would be very interesting to all of us, since we always wonder, well, what happens after death? Mm-hmm. So why don't you take us to this second experience when you died? You were in your 20s, right?
Yes, I was 25 when I died.
Yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about that story and then the experience you had?
So I was taking a really popular weightlifting supplement at the time, and it was so popular you couldn't get it at any of the local stores anymore. Oh. So we went online to buy it, and one of the only places that had it in stock online was a place out of Thailand. And what we didn't realize is the supply that was being shipped overseas from them was 100% pure solution, whereas what we were buying in the States was a 5% watered down solution. So we got it. We got really excited. We wanted to go work out and took our normal little bottle cap full. And instantly, me and my buddy both felt really sick. And we figured, well, let's go eat something and we'll probably feel better. So we went a couple blocks down the road from where he lived, and there was a fast food place. We went in, and I went straight to the bathroom, and it was one of those single-use restrooms. So I locked the door, and the room started getting really dizzy and then blacked out. And meanwhile, my buddy went in the restaurant and collapsed on one of the booths and started to vomit all over the booth. And they called 911 and hauled him away, but nobody had seen that we had come in with each other. So they nobody knew that I was in the bathroom. So
Wow.
a couple hours later,
Hours
later, my phone was ringing in the bathroom, and one of the customers kept trying to get in the bathroom. So he finally went to the manager and said, "Hey, I think somebody may be in trouble in there. They've been there a long time and the phone keeps ringing. Nobody's answering it." So the manager went over there, unlocked the door, and there's a dead guy on the floor.
Oh my
No breathing. I was purple. Like my neck was really swollen wide. It was just gross, really gross to behold. And from my perspective at that point, I was watching it, but I was watching it from outside myself. What it felt like to me was that I was sitting in like an auditorium or a theater, sitting in like a comfortable seat, watching on the screen this show of this dead guy on the floor, but from the view of above. So even though I was watching it, in a comfortable chair, kind of leaning back, what I was watching was from the point of view from above and seeing this dead body on the ground, seeing the manager freak out. He called 911. They get a medic there, or a team of medics. They do some, some chest compressions for a few seconds, but they had documented the body as 79 degrees at that point, so they knew I was dead. Yeah.
Wow.
So they did pronounce me dead. They called a police officer because they had to get a police officer verification, that kind of thing, and they filled out all the paperwork, put me in a body bag, strapped me down. Put me in the back of an ambulance and just left me there for about another 30 or so minutes.
Wow.
Until the police officer showed up. He just checked the boxes on what the guys already did. He gave them the green light to go ahead and turn the body into the medical examiner for an autopsy. So the medics, they pull away from this scene of this fast food restaurant. And as they do so, there's a brand new medic who's sitting in the back. This is like his first week being an EMT. And he's sitting in the back seat. He's got two veterans in the front seat. And I'm sitting here watching all this, and to me, it's not me.
Right.
To me, it's a show. I'm watching some weird show, and I keep thinking, like, why do they keep taking the camera angle from the top? Like that was like something for me. I'm like, why would they angle from this doesn't make sense.
Right.
But I was like, I'm still here. I'm going to watch the show.
Yeah.
And as I'm watching, I see this light actually start to form around the hearts of, like, the heart area of this new medic. And it was almost like it started to glow. And all of a sudden I heard really loud a voice say, "This one's not dead." And I remember it was so loud that even where I was, I like went to look around. And he did the same thing, the medic. So I knew that he heard what I heard.
Right.
And he was looking around to see if that was maybe a joke from his counterparts in the front of the ambulance, but it wasn't. He debated it in his mind whether he really heard that or not for a few seconds. And then the glow started to expand, and it went from his heart up till the glow was going around his mind as well as his heart, and almost like from his waist up.
Wow.
He started to glow, and it got really even louder, and I heard, "This one's not dead." And that time he began to take action. He didn't even hesitate for a second. He unzipped the body bag. He started feeling all over the neck area, under the arm. Then he went down to the groin area, like on the inner thigh. And when he pushed down really hard, and he like connected with the bone in the thigh, like the thigh bone. And when he made contact with the bone itself, there was like a spark of electricity from me where I was sitting up in the theater to him down there. And that was a little bit of an inkling that something odd was going on. This was not just a movie that I was watching. But that was enough for him to start taking action, like to start trying to resuscitate the body. So first thing he did is he did a little mini trach right here and fed a tube down and started pumping oxygen into the lungs. He ripped open the body bag, number one, and started clipping off the shirt and putting these pads on the body so that he could shock the heart. And he shocked it a first round, and it made an alarm bell when he did that. And all of a sudden, the two veteran medics started noticing what he was doing. They're like, "You're going to get fired. Don't do this. This guy's dead. You have to know when someone's gone." That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it didn't even faze him. He wasn't even fazed at all. So first round of shocks, nothing. Second round of shocks to the heart. There was a single heartbeat, and then flatlined. And it was really faint, but it was definitely a beat. And that gave him even more hope. So then he hurried and shocked a third time. And the third time, it was a steady, faint beat.
Wow.
And with that steady, faint beat, the veteran medics in the front completely changed who they were and went into action mode themselves.
Right.
The driver said something like, "There's a hospital a block and a half over here. Call ahead." And so they called ahead. And literally a block and a half from where my heart started, there was an emergency trauma team ready to meet the body. So, so they met the body. They put the body on a hospital gurney, and as they transferred it over, I felt moving, and that was a little weird to me. But I still didn't dawn on me that what was going on was me.
Really?
Because me was up here watching, not down there. So how could that be me?
Right.
That'd be kind of like watching someone out on this balcony that's you. Like, that's not you. You're right here, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there, well, that was weird. Why did I feel that? And then they started to strap down the body because the body was starting to go into convulsions, and there was like foam and weird stuff coming out of the mouth. And as I was like going into these convulsions, they strapped down the body with these like leg straps first. And then they went and did the arm straps. Well, they got both arms strapped down. And I remember feeling like I couldn't move my arms where I was sitting.
Really?
So I resisted, and I'm left-handed. I resisted with my left hand, and I looked down and I felt my arm come up and get free. And I looked down and saw that the body had just ripped the strap. And that's when it hit me that what I was watching
was you.
Was me. And
oh my gosh.
And when that happened, just like fear. All these fear and kind of like negative thoughts came in, like, "You idiot, you've been dead this whole time, you didn't even know." Like just all these dark thoughts and feelings came in, and it felt like in this theater where I was, it felt like all these dark forces actually started to come and smother me.
Wow.
And as they were getting closer and closer, and I felt like my light, who I was going to be put out. As it was happening, I felt this warmth all of a sudden start on my back. This is always hard for me to talk about. This warmth was this love that you can't describe. But 2 seconds of this love can immediately eradicate the worst harm that this entire life can give you.
Really?
Yeah, it's so beautiful. And it's a love that we don't get to experience here. We don't. But it's a love that is the foundation of what is here. And it's that love that the universe was built on. And it's, people call it God's love or universe's love or source love or creator's love. But it's the building blocks of what has created this life. And I felt it. It was like a light. It like started warming my back, and it kind of flooded over me. And as I did, I felt it was coming from behind me. So I turned away from this horrible scene in front of me. And I turned around and I saw this man, like all dressed in white. And he had a long white beard, very pink skin, very blue eyes. His blue eyes felt like they could literally like stare through you and like see who you were as a soul. And so obviously this guy looked like the typical must be God.
Yeah.
So I'm like, "So are you God? Are you God?" And he just like shook his head and laughed. He's like, "No, I'm not God." And I'm like, "Well, then you must be Jesus then, right?" And he's like, "No, I'm not Jesus." And I'm like, "Well, who are you? What's going on here?" And he just explained that he was here to be a guide for me, and he was a helper. He was going to help me go where I wanted to go. If I wanted to go back to where I had just come, I could go back right then. Or I could go with him. And there's no question. There was no possible way I would want to go towards that pain and that ache and that fear that I was feeling. I told him, I said, wherever you're going, I'm going with you. I'm like, I want to go with you.
I'm done with that.
Yeah, I'm none of that anymore. So,
Uh-huh.
so he said, okay, you're going to have to come in and embrace my energy. And you're going to have to not just travel a distance, but you're going to have to travel with 3 layers of yourself. You're going to have to travel from point A to point B, which is a physical distance.
Right.
But you're also going to have to travel with understanding. And I have to embrace or just be willing to accept the possibility of certain principles to go with him. And then additional to that, I have to raise my frequency. I have to raise my energy, because where we're going is extremely high energy. And for me to get there, I have to be matched at least close to that energy to exist there or be there. Oh. And so he explained those 3 parts to me, and me being raised how I was in my faith, Christian, and I was like, I got this. And he just kind of laughed, and he's like, no, there's a lot more you're not allowed to know here. And that's why he explained that's why he was there, to help be my guide. He was going to help guide me along the way. So he asked me a few introductory principles. The first thing was being authentic, which I thought I had been, but he showed me myself, who I was, and showed me that there was a version of me that would be with my family. And there would be a version of me that would be with my friends. There would be a version of me that would be on movie sets, working movie sets, or TV sets. Or there was a version of me, I used to build homes. There'd be a version of me on construction sites. But all these versions weren't the same person. And he showed me that being authentic would be me being the same being, personality, language, habits, the exact same, no matter where I go.
Wow.
And he explained that it's really important, because until we can be authentic with ourselves, we can't grow. Wow. We ourselves can't grow until we authentically are who we are, number one. And then secondly, authentically love ourselves.
Wow, that is such a powerful concept. And I've often wondered that, because I think that's something we really struggle with as humans, because I think the adversary attacks that. It's interesting that he taught you that as the first principle, because I think the adversary attacks that. Oh, you're not worth anything. How can you even be proud of yourself? And if you made so many mistakes.
And if you think about it too, one of the reasons why we put on kind of a different personality for different groups is out of protection. Because we figure if we're our true self, why are we hiding their true self? Yeah. Because somehow we feel our true self would be not accepted. Yes. Or excluded or made fun of or something like that. Yes. So we put on this different persona for certain groups. Right. And that's not the way we were built to be. We were built to be authentic and to understand who we really are. And that was essentially another part of one of the principles, to understand that if you looked at all the different forms of life in the universe and you took the very, very, very top, that would be the humanity that's on Earth today. And according to all the life forms that Source or God has created, we are the cream of the cream. We are, every one of us, kings and queens of the Most High God. Right. And we don't act like it. No. We should.
Well, it's because a lot of us, maybe we've heard that before, maybe we haven't. Yeah. But we don't internalize it.
And that was one thing he helped me understand too. He helped me see the vastness of the universe, and our human brain can't comprehend it. It can't comprehend it. It's just so vast. There's life everywhere in the universe. Throughout, it's permeating the entire universe, life. And yet here we are, kings and queens, suffering in our own dementia of sorts. Yeah. That we're having hardships and such, but we are all kings and queens in his kingdom.
Wow. That is powerful. What has knowing just that first principle meant to you since you've come back?
Absolutely changed me. After my experience, I'm definitely a different person. I used to be a bit hot-headed, and especially with driving and politics and a lot of different things. And I'm still very passionate about freedom, because it is free agency that we are here to utilize. And it's our free agency that helps us work out our spiritual muscles. And that's one of the biggest things that I did take away from my experience, is the whole reason we are here is to learn to make choices.
Wow.
And to learn what we're going to be, what we are able to create with our choices. Because when you're right next to God in God's kingdom, anything you want is so permeated with that love of Creator that it just starts forming in front of you.
Wow.
And it's kind of like taking a kid to Disneyland after living in Disneyland for a year. It's not going to be so special, right? So the only way to learn how special Disneyland was is take the kid out of Disneyland into the real world, right? Where you work, you get a job, you have a family, that kind of stuff. You learn to make choices so that when you get back, you can appreciate that.
That makes sense.
And that's what it's all about, is we are, we're not able to use those choice muscles very good there, because we can't think selfishly there. It's impossible.
Right.
Because that all encompassing love is so permeating everything there that it's literally impossible to have a negative thought or almost an independent thought. You can still have an independent thought, but it's surrounded by that same love, because that love permeates everything.
Wow.
And so for us to learn how to make choices, we have to go far away from that love.
That makes sense.
And so we go to the third dimension where we exist here. And some of us are able to experience fourth dimensional existence here, even fifth dimensional existence here, and still be here. But up there is a lot higher than 5 dimensions.
That is so fascinating. So he taught you this first principle, and there's more to come, right?
There is. So there's just...
now, I know there were several. Maybe you can pick a few more handfuls and what you were experiencing as he was teaching you.
Those would be the kind of the foundational principles for me. Some of the biggest aspects of that, the first few. But another thing that was kind of hard for my ego to accept, as when I got up there, when I actually got to heaven, I looked around and I'm like, how come I don't see only people of my faith? I'm like, I was always believing that I was going to pretty much feel like everybody at my church was going to be there, everybody that I grew up and had passed away, it would be all of them. But it wasn't. There was all sorts of cultures and eras and times and faiths. There was people there that were from our future. There was people there from our past.
Really?
And that was another principle, that time is only the rules for the board game. But when you step away from the board game, those rules don't matter.
Wow.
And time is one of the rules for this board game. So when you step out of this dimension, this existence, you can choose where you want to jump back in.
Really? Well, that's fascinating.
But all of it's happening now. So there you realize that time is what they call now, the moment of now, or the moment of one. And that's all of us growing and developing in our own special way and getting a specific catered life path that we get to choose.
So you went to this heaven.
Yes, so we approached this place. It first started looking like a star that was getting brighter and brighter and brighter. And what's weird is it was like almost a bluish white, the star itself. And then as we got closer and closer and closer, I realized it wasn't a star. It wasn't like a planet or a sun, burning. It was actually a planet, but you could fit 1 million Earths inside this planet. It's huge.
Oh, really?
So huge, so much bigger than our Earth. And as we're getting closer and closer, I realized the light is coming off of the planet, kind of the way that the moon looks to us, how it looks like it's glowing. But that place, it's not reflecting light. It's actually coming from inside, or coming from the actual planet. And as we get closer and closer, I see all these like pearls. They look kind of like opalescent, like creamy colored pearls, like all over the place, floating around this planet. And as we approach, and it's funny because I had been talking about it for years, and finally I had somebody come up and say, maybe those pearls were like the pearly gates. And I'm like, oh yeah, maybe they were. But I never put 2 and 2 together until
funny.
that person had said it.
That's funny.
So maybe they were the pearly gates, I'm not sure. But as we approached, I asked my guide, His name, he had told me his name at that point. His name is Drake. I asked Drake, I said, Drake, what are these? And it's so cool. He was able to do this the entire traveling of us getting close to this place. He could take my consciousness and just put it places and then bring it right back, like instantaneous, kind of like the internet, right? So at this point, he said, or I asked, what's going on in here? And he's like, well, I'll show you. So he puts my consciousness inside one of these pearls. And I see that there's like spirits all over in there, a lot of spirits. And they're all angry and yelling and screaming, like profanities. And they're all yelling at each other, but they don't see each other. And so then I asked the second level, like, who are they yelling at? I can tell they're not yelling at each other because they're kind of yelling out into open space. And he helped me understand with this one gentleman. He let me see what he was seeing. And he showed me that this old man was yelling at his son and was like cussing him out for a betrayal. He felt betrayed almost to death, like of this betrayal of his son. And then across from this old gentleman, there was a lady, and she in turn was yelling at her daughter, which is kind of odd, but both kind of the same energy though. It felt like betrayal energy. And I think that's what this pearl was. It was a pearl of betrayal energy. All these spirits were in there. And here's what it was. I was explained by Drake that this was kind of like a decompression spa of sorts for certain spirits to cleanse themselves of negative energy. Once they were able to do that, then they were in a place where they could get help to be raised their frequency and go where we were going. And as that was explained to me, the old man kind of like took a deep breath and stopped yelling. And then out of nowhere, he kind of realized, whoa, where am I? He started to look around, and within a millisecond, these angels came from outside the pearl into next to him, and then he was gone. And so they took him on his journey where he was going to go. And so these pearls, or this pearly gate is not necessarily a gate keeping people out. It's a gate getting you conditioned and ready for what's on the other side, which is heaven, which is this planet. It's huge.
So I guess one of the lessons learned is you can only progress as fast as you're willing.
As you're willing, yeah. But the whole system, even those pearls themselves, are built out of that love. And it was really cool because the second that old man had realized that he was done cleansing himself, that energy, that love was right there. And they were able to take him. And it was cool because he was from probably like early 1900s, late 1800s. And, me being the guy who came from the third dimension, I'm thinking time linearly.
Right.
Like,
You've been in there forever.
You've been there a long time. Like, you've been there at least almost 100 years, maybe 150. And then Drake would just smile at those thoughts because he would understand. You don't use words because you don't have the low third dimensional body. You have a high dimensional body, which is your spirit body, which is actually a body. So you don't have to use your mouth to communicate.
You just
think it, and they think it, and you just understand stuff. It's kind of the way that computers assimilate or compute with each other, network here. And it's that love. It's that same love that's running all of it, that it's just instantaneous. The second you even think a question, the answer's coming already.
Wow.
So, yeah. It was
no
really
miscommunication in the afterlife?
No, none yet. Yeah.
It's kind of good to know.
Unfortunately, we can't claim we didn't hear you. So.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we get back, we'll have Vinney tell us a little bit more about what heaven was like. Stay tuned.
Hi, this is Tamara K. Anderson, and I want to share something special with you. When our son Nathan was diagnosed with autism, I felt like the life we had expected for him was ripped away, and with it, my own heart shattered as well. It's very common for families to feel anger, pain, confusion, and anxiety when a child is diagnosed. This is where my book, Normal for Me, comes into play. It shares my story of learning to replace my pain with acceptance, peace, joy, and hope. Normal for Me has helped change many lives, and I'd like to give this book to as many families as possible. We've put together something I think is really special. My friends and listeners can order copies of my book at a significantly discounted price, and we will send them to families who have just had a child diagnosed with autism or another special needs diagnosis. We will put your name inside the cover so they will know someone out there loves them and wants to help. I will also sign each copy. You can order as little as one or as many as hundreds to be shared with others. So go to my website, tamarakanderson.com, and visit the store section for more information and to place your order. You can bless the lives of many families by sending them hope, love, and peace. Check it out today at tamarakanderson.com and help me spread hope to the world.
And we're back. I've been talking to Vinney Todd about his near-death experience, and we've just gone through and learned how he died and what happened after that and how he's been journeying towards heaven. And he just found out what the pearly gates are. And now we're going to pick up the story.
It was really cool. So after my experience with the pearly gate, he pulls me back, and we're still on our trajectory towards this planet. And again, I'm in awe of just the light coming off of it. And I can even sense that there's no way a physical human eye could even be near this. It's too much energy.
Too bright?
Too bright, too much energy. It's brighter than our sun, way brighter than our sun.
Wow.
But it's not a burning light. It's not fusion. It's not what we see on our sun. And so we come and we get closer and closer and closer, and I start realizing that this bright blue is starting to green up as we get closer and closer, and blue up in like ocean areas and river areas and mountain areas, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. And the colors there, I mean, you know, if you break down the actual color gamut of what we have in our real world, you can pixelize it to about 1 million pixels. Mm-hmm. In actual color differential that you can find in the world in the third dimension.
Right.
And I can easily guesstimate there's 100 million colors over there.
Really?
And yeah, there's just so much more. Every color has 1,000 different versions, and the colors there actually have energy. They have voice, they have smell, they have taste.
Wow.
Even touch down on the grass where we actually touch down. Even touching the grass with my feet, I felt that love. I felt like I plugged into that love. And if you could cry there, it would be like crying. I just started to like liquefy almost, like who I was, because that love was so strong, and I didn't feel I deserved it. I didn't. And that these silly blades of grass were so beautiful. Like, to even describe in human words is impossible, but the best way I can describe it is sweet, loving music that smelled like the best smell I'd ever smelled in my life.
Wow.
And that was just the blades of grass.
Wow.
And there's flowers, there was trees, there was a stream. I got to experience all of that, and I got to see this building, this huge building, and it was built out of white marble, like white opalescent marble. And the entire building was one block of marble. And the way it was built is out of loving consciousness. Our source, our creator, asked this building to exist. And the building formed itself out of that love. And what was really neat is there was no doors in any of the rooms. But yet when people wanted to go from room to room, they would come and lovingly ask to go from one room to the other. And an opening would just form. They'd go through, and then the opening would seal itself back up. Wow. And this place was like a university of sorts, but beyond time, because there's people from our future, from our present, from our past, from our ancient past, which oddly looks very much like our future. But all of these beings are there learning from each other. And they're learning in a way that is not polluted with politics or with money or business or corporations. This learning that they do there is completely unadulterated. and it's true knowledge. And so our yearning for learning gets to continue. So we get to learn more if we want to.
No, I like that concept because I am a true learner. If I want to learn how to podcast, I learn how to podcast. You know, I mean, I have this thirst inside of me that doesn't seem to get satiated. Like I always want to keep learning, and I think it drives my husband crazy that I take so many online classes or whatever. Yeah. I'm like, I'm always curious. I want to learn more, and so I'm glad.
Me too. And you know what's funny is I like to learn before I died, but since I died, I have this weird knack for remembering things. The oddest, weird, most random things. I just remember them. Data, physics, math, like just numbers, sequences, patterns, just so many things that are so different now since I died. And I pick up on patterns everywhere. Really? And we have no idea that loving force that runs that existence or the whole universe is very present here. But you almost have to be that like super aware person to pick up on these patterns and these frequencies, these especially numerical patterns. It's a way that God really likes to send messages to us. And specifically, I really resonate with the number 1111. And to me, that connects to me as my God number, because it's all arrows pointing to Him. And also it's the first number. It's the beginning, and the way my mind understands it, God exists at the 11th level of the 11th dimension. And I got to touch down at the first level of the 11th dimension in heaven. And that's what heaven is the 11th dimension. And that also helps us understand where we are. We're being in a third dimensional existence here. We have quite a bit of raising our own frequency to be able to get to where His loving frequency is. Yeah.
Now, when you talk about frequencies here, is it like, one of the things I'm fascinated with is the concept of light. And, you know, we see that battle in books, in movies, you know, the battle between light and darkness. Is frequency like light, or how would you describe frequency?
Here's the best way I've been able to describe it. And again, this is trying to use words to explain things that there's no words to explain.
Right, yeah.
But I'm
sorry.
You know, in my past, I was an avid studier of the Bible and of Scripture. And when you study Jacob's ladder essentially, or existentially, is the frequency scale. At the top of Jacob's ladder is God, our Creator, and at the bottom is the opposite of God, the antithesis of God. Some might call the opposite of God Satan,
right,
or devil, or whatever. But here's the funny thing: if God created Jacob's ladder, He created the bottom and the top. And so God knew that for us to grow, we had to get distance from Him. The same way that in this world, sometimes our kids can't grow up till they get a little distance from us. It's just a fact. And now, does it need to be that big that we could move from God? No. But it's the same principle. And for us to grow, we have to get some distance. So we have to sink down Jacob's ladder. But what's really neat, though, is our daily choices. Every single choice we make, from the air we breathe, where we live, what we choose to eat or consume, whether it's with our mouth, our eyes, or our ears, because we consume with all three.
Yes.
Those choices will either raise us up the scale or push us down the scale. And if we're not sure if it's raising us or lowering us, it's lowering us. There's no question. Wow. So if we're like, no, this decision just has me treading water. No, it's sinking you, period. You're either raising your frequency or you're lowering your frequency. And if you want to learn how to raise your frequency, come from the perspective of love, period. Love those around you, love your enemies, love those who cut you off, and see it for what it is. When someone cuts me off, before I died, I used to give them a special finger and sometimes like wave it at them and see if they'd pull over and I could cuss them out or whatever. And now when, since I died, someone cuts me off, I literally am like, look at me there. That's me right over there. And it is. We're all different fingers on one hand. And for one of us to hurt another, we're only hurting ourselves. We can't hurt someone else. And it's so funny in this life because everyone has this thing where I can't forgive this, I can't forgive that. And somehow we think that gets to the other person. And it's kind of like drinking poison and hoping someone else gets sick. And when we hurt someone, when we do anything, when we don't forgive someone, we're only drinking poison. It only hurts us.
Wow.
It does, and existentially, it's going to hurt them too because we're all one together. But it hurts us first, and more than anyone.
Wow, that is a huge, huge takeaway. I love that you see this connection between all of us.
We're all connected. Yeah.
So, is that one of the things that you learned? Is that we're all connected as children of God, or is there a better term for
we're
it?
a quilt work.
A quilt
of God. And for one thread to be angry at another is to still damage the quilt.
I love that. Because we're all part of the same masterpiece.
We are. And to try to discredit one thread because it's in the middle, it's not seen, is to discredit the whole thing. We all play our sacred divine part, every single one of us.
Wow.
Even the ones that think they're not making a difference in this world, going around and being a loving person, you are broadcasting that love frequency. You are changing the world, period.
Wow.
You don't have to go build towers and bridges or be a politician, or you don't have to go do these grandiose things to change the world. You can change it by just being a loving person, period.
Wow. And that starts by changing yourself.
Gotta love yourself before you can love anyone else. Wow. You can never truly love anyone outside you until you love what's inside first.
Wow.
Because love is a mirror.
A mirror. That's an interesting thought.
I help people that have kind of life obstacles and such, and I run into a lot of people that are having marital problems. The number one thing I hear with people with marital problems is they just don't make me happy. And I go, you're unhappy and you think somewhere you're going to find someone else that's going to make you happy. But here's the thing. The only answer to that unhappiness or hunger is you. You have to make you happy first before you could ever feel someone else make you happy.
That's true. That's very, very
And it starts with love. You got to love yourself. You got to love yourself first.
Wow. That is such a powerful concept. Now, why don't you bring us back around to when you came back?
Right as I was noticing the building, and I'd been through the experience of like all the grass and trees and flowers and river and water, my guide, Drake, came to me and he got really close to me and he gave me this heart hug. And it's kind of what we're emulating when we hug each other here. Mm-hmm. But what we do in that form is literally our cores, our centers, come together and become one for a few seconds. Mm-hmm. And when we do that, we just get so full of this love mm-hmm. of our Creator. Mm-hmm. And it's a beautiful thing. And when he got done, he pulled away and said, this is going to be really hard. I promise you it's going to be worth it though. And as he said that, I instantly started hearing in my ear a blessing being given to my body back on earth. Mm. And I was hearing it as loud as if it was in my own ear. Mm. So I was hearing it through my own body. And so I obviously was being strung back to my body. And by the time I heard amen to this blessing that was being given to my body, to this special prayer being given to my body, I felt like I was instantly back.
Wow.
And what had happened was my brother, now fast forward, I'd been in the hospital now for a little over 3 days, and I'd been brain dead for those 3 days. Wow. My brother had come in and given me this special prayer blessing over me mm-hmm. that third night. And as he said amen, he had said that about 10:15 p.m. I woke up at 1 a.m. To me, it was instantaneous, but
right.
It must have taken that time of him saying amen for me to actually travel that vast distance to get back. Yeah. And I woke up. I was fine. Completely fine. I pulled hoses off of me. I had hoses all over my mouth, and diodes and a cath, like all these things. I yanked them all off.
I'm sure your doctors and nurses were like,
So I yanked them all off, and then I just stood there. I felt very extremely claustrophobic because our spirit self, who we really are, is much larger than who we exist in this physical body.
Really?
We're vastly larger. And so coming back into that physical body was very constraining to me. And it kind of felt like, going to Disneyland and then being put handcuffs on and squished into a little box and locked.
Oh.
That's what it felt like. And so I instantly woke up claustrophobic. And I still struggle a little bit with that. Because I got to play outside the body for a while. and there's another reason why, we have to come into baby bodies so that because if they could talk right off the bat, they'd be like, what the hell are you doing stuffing me in this little body?
I know, right?
So yeah, it took a few seconds. I just stood there, and I stood there just taking in, just breathing, and realized that I was standing there naked.
Oh,
I'm
gosh.
like, I better grab some clothes. So I went rifling through the cupboards and found a stack of these gowns, and I wrapped 3 of them around my middle section, and I bolted.
Did you really? You're like, I am out of here.
I was leaving, and this again is 1 a.m, and I think there's 2 nurses on the entire floor that I'm on, and because there wasn't a lot of critical care in that hospital. In fact, it was a brand new hospital. I think there was maybe 3 or 4 rooms with patients in them. So I went running down towards where I could see there was an elevator. And so I'm all bolting down there. I get to the elevator and I hit the down button and I hear a scream, like a squeal so loud. And I looked down and the nurse had run in my room and saw all my stuff was pulled off. Even my gown was on the ground, which the gown had blood and stuff on it. And and she just squealed, screamed. And then she came out of the room and the other nurse met her. And she was like, he's gone. And then they both, it was so weird. They both somehow knew I was right there at the elevator because they both were like, and as they both saw me and I'm sitting there holding these gowns, they both screamed. And then I'm like, oh man, I'm toast. I got to go back. So they made me go back in my room and put on a gown and hook up some more diodes. But every time, as soon as they leave the room, I just pull them off. I couldn't have them touching me. It hurt to even have the gown touching me. It really did.
Really?
I felt so claustrophobic. Yeah.
Wow.
But it was funny. They had to call a security guard, and he came and stood by my room, and I told him I wanted to go home. They're like, you can't. You were dead, or you were brain dead. And I'm like, well, I'm fine now. So they're like, no, it's a fluke. You're gonna go back under. They were trying to tell me that I was gonna go back unconscious again. That sometimes brain dead people come out for a few minutes and then they go back and then they die. So that's what they thought was happening. That
you were going to die.
I was just going to fall over dead and they were going to be in trouble or something. So I hung out and I said, what paperwork do I got to sign? Give me whatever I need. And they called in a neurologist. They called in a cardiologist. They called in about 4 or 5 specialties. And I had to get waivers signed by the doctors and myself saying I wouldn't sue anybody.
Oh my
and I checked myself out. But they wouldn't let me leave till about 6 a.m. So by 6 a.m., they finally gave me the green light, and I had to sign a phone book full of paperwork. And so I signed it all and called my dad and said, hey, Dad, I'm alive. Can you come pick me up? And this was his answer. Okay. I'm glad you weren't worried, Dad. So he came and picked me up and took me back home, and I just went jogging and just...
Wow.
I felt like jogging was the only thing I could do to feed that desire to get out of my body. It felt so conflicting to even be back in a body. Yeah. But what was weird though, is when I first woke up, I actually didn't remember my whole experience yet.
Really?
I just was picking back up where I left off. I didn't even remember dying. I didn't even remember.
Really?
I didn't even remember going to the restaurant or any of that. I kept asking what happened to me, and when I was signing the paperwork, and every medical person had a different story, and I'm like, this isn't. I don't think any of these.
It's not fitting.
Yeah. So it was 2 days later. So actually, the next day I went to work and back then I was working construction. So I went back to work building houses, and I was just back to normal. And met up with my sister and her family a couple nights later. And she was the one who brought it out of me. She came up to me and she's like, "You were dead. You know that, right?" And I'm like, "Well, that's what they say." And she's like, "Did you have an experience? Did you see anything?" And I wanted to say no. But no didn't come out of my mouth. All of a sudden, my whole experience started coming out of my mouth. And it felt like someone like hijacked my body.
Really?
And I'm like, "What the? I'm not saying this." And then as the sentences started to form, it like downloaded into me, or didn't download into me. It's like the cover that was covering it up came off. And all of a sudden I was like, "Oh my gosh,
I remember.
I did die. I saw my body." And so I kind of gave her the short version, but the hard part for me at that point is that love was still so real to me to even think about it. I would just bawl. Really? And I'm not a public crying guy ever, right?
Yeah.
Like even around people who are really close to me, never saw me cry ever.
Right.
But with this, even to think about it, I would just bawl like a little baby. And so I wouldn't talk about it with people for quite a while. And I was extremely suicidal. Really? I wanted to go back. Wow. And I kept hearing spirits tell me things. And I thought I was crazy at the same time. So I was trying to figure all this out. This was a new version of me, and it was very different than the version before. And so I was trying to figure all this out, and had a run-in with a cop even, and he arrested me for a ticket that never got sent to me. And all this is happening. But God kept sending me messages. In fact, the very money to bail me out for that stupid unpaid ticket was the exact amount my brother had on him. Wow. At like midnight one night, and so that added to my experience of, God's still looking out, and I need to be aware of that, and to stop trying to want to go home and just let it happen on its own time. And once I finally accepted that, I actually started to receive messages in spirit that something really good was about to happen. But I needed to take immediate actions to start living a different life than I did before my experience. And so I did. I went through my phone and deleted contacts of people, or blocked contacts of my past that I didn't want to have contact with anymore. And I only left in contacts where I felt like I could make a positive difference, or they could make a positive difference on me. So I went forward with that, and literally 4 days later, I met my wife. And we knew instantly we were going to get married before we even went on a date. And it was...
What?
Yeah, and it was... Did
she know too, or just
you?
We
both knew. Wow, yeah.
That's crazy.
We hadn't even been on a date yet, and we were driving up... This is Provo Canyon. And going to my family's cabin up there. And we go past what's called Bridalveil Falls there. And as we were going past, we were both silent, and that wasn't like us, because when we would hang out, we were just chatting, just talking, both of us. We loved talking to each other. And I asked her, I didn't ask her, I have spirit guides. So since I died, I have spirit guides. All of us do, but I talk to mine. And so I asked
Can you see them?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
More than one?
Oh, yeah. All of us have more than one.
Wow. That's cool.
So I have spirit guides, and I, as we were driving past Bridalveil, one of them said, "Ask her what she prayed about last night." And so I'm all silent. I kind of look out of my side of my eye. I'm all, "So, did you pray about anything interesting lately?" and she goes, "Why?" She gets really defensive, like, "Why? Did you?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I go, "This is gonna sound crazy," but my guides were saying it was okay to say this. They said, "Go and tell her," because I had prayed. I'd asked, "Why do I feel this connection with her?" And they weren't giving me any answers. So I asked, "Is it because we're supposed to get married?" And it was like instantly, yes.
Wow.
And so I'm like, "I don't even know her. I just barely met her, and we haven't even been on one date." And so as we're driving up, I go, "Well, I prayed I think I said, I prayed about something really special or important." And I got an answer. And I go, what about you? She's like, yeah. And I go, what was your answer? She's like, yeah. And I'm like, me too. And then she asked me, she's like, what was it you were praying about? She wanted to hear it.
She wanted you to say it first.
I'm like, that we're supposed to get married? She's like, oh, me too. I'm like, oh, okay. Just good with it. And kind of had to just get that out from the beginning. And it was really neat, though. A few months later, in August, we ended up getting married. In that month of July before we got married, we went up to Wyoming to a family reunion. And that wasn't my thing. That wasn't my scene. But it was a scene she would go into. Plus, it was a scene I was supposed to embrace. I was supposed to embrace the family scene and the family idea of reunions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And again, it wasn't my thing, though.
Yeah.
So we go to this reunion, and someone comes up to us and says, hey, come to the high school tonight. They're going to do like this play and this presentation at the football field showing the history of the town, of this little town in Wyoming called Afton, Wyoming. She's like, that'd be really neat. I'm like, no, that's going to be dumb. She's like, no, we're going. I'm like, okay. So we go, and we're sitting there watching this play. They're doing dances. They're showing the history of the town, who the founders were and such. And then they have this big movie screen that's out in the middle of the field, and they're showing like slides and pictures of pioneers and different people that helped found the town up there.
Yeah.
And up comes this picture. This old man with a long white beard. And even though it was like a black and white picture, you could see his eyes were blue. And they were like piercing you. And I froze. My energy completely changed so much that Andrea, my fiance at the time, looked at me and said, that's the guy. That's your guide. And it was. And it was cool. The picture said Charles D. Kazare on the picture. Come to find out, the D meant for Drake.
Oh my!
And Drake was my guide. And so I was just flabbergasted, and I knew that my grandmother was a Kazare. And so I'm like, I wonder if there's a connection. She grew up in Wyoming. He was one of the first clergy of the town.
Wow.
And so we went and asked my grandmother, and it was a few days later, I think, that when we were asking her, and she said, oh yeah, Grandpa Drake, great Grandpa Drake is what she called him. And it turns out it was her great grandfather, which would have been my great great grandfather.
Wow.
Or triple great great grandfather. And the way she described him was he had these blue eyes that could look through your soul. And
you're like,
I know him personally. And I'm like, and he's standing right here. No,
was he?
He was.
Oh my word!
And it was just really cool because he was kind of showing me, like, see, there's this love all around you, like. Because even at that point, all these good things are happening to me. I still am thinking, you're crazy. I tell people my story and they're like, you're crazy. And I'm like, yeah, you're right, I am. And then I hear and speak to spirit, and I think, you're crazy. That's not something people do. And
but is that being authentic?
Exactly.
Going back to principle one.
It wasn't. And so God sent me this little like nugget to find out that my guide was a real person here on earth. And fast forward, I get married. I'm still a builder at this time, and I end up going up to Alaska for a couple big custom homes I had to build up there. And as soon as we get done, all my projects are finished, and I have no more projects for like a month. And family comes to me and says, hey, your grandmother, who I had just talked to, a few months earlier, her health is failing, and she needs somebody to come take care of her. And so without even skipping a beat, we volunteered, and we moved to Wyoming to go take care of her. And while we were there, my wife was able to go through a lot of the documents and stuff for my grandma. And one of those documents was a prayer, a special prayer given in my faith. People call it a blessing, a patriarchal blessing. And it was the one that was given to him, to Drake.
Really?
And it was really neat. It was like the blessing, and it might not have been the official patriarchal blessing, but it was like that. It was a long 3-page blessing, a 2.5-page blessing, and it was all written down. And when you read the first 2 paragraphs, they talked about his life in the physical realm. And then almost an entire 2 pages was all about his work on the other side. As a guide, a transport, someone who assists in helping those transfer from the physical realm to the other side.
Really?
Yeah. So there was like a third nugget to that gift of understanding that I couldn't have made that up. There's no possible way in because my ego is still saying, you're crazy. This must have been, I'm very scientifically minded. So my brain kept trying to say, no, this is just your mind trying to fill in the blank spaces. But here's the thing, after so many signs of things being dead on 100% true, you realize you have to give up on that whole ego of this is your brain making up things. This is real.
Right.
And so you have to go with that. And so I have. And some people still to this day like, no, Vinney, he's crazy. Stay away from him. He'll tell you things he's not supposed to know.
There are people out there who are probably super curious. I know, first of all, you've written a book, and
yes.
it'll be coming out sometime in the next, who knows how
we
long.
hope in the next 6 months-ish. We hope.
But why don't you tell us a little bit about where people can find you so that they can, I like what Vinney said.
Yeah.
I resonate with it. How can people find you and find out more about your
best place is I'm doing a website called Living God's Light, and eventually I'll be branching off and doing a Facebook page out of it, Instagram out of it, that kind of thing. I really am gonna take it on as kind of a campaign of light, that I want to be that light for those who need it. And it's not for everybody. It's definitely not digestible for everybody, and I understand that. I of all people understand that. So, that even my message is not for everybody, but it is for a lot of us. And if I wasn't someone who went through this, like when I go back to who I was before my experience, I needed this. I needed this understanding. And I'm so grateful that I was able to receive it and come back. At the same time, I really look forward to one day when I get to go back there. It's not something at all that I fear. And I embrace it, and I'm not trying to bring it on me in any way, but I really am excited for one day when I get to go back.
That's cool. So I love that. That's a good takeaway too, is that we shouldn't fear death.
Not at all. Oh my gosh, it's like fearing Disney World or Disneyland. Like, why?
Well, there are some people like my husband who does not like Disneyland or Disney World.
Well, if there's no,
sadly to me, because I like Disneyland and Disney World, but yeah, it's not something to be feared. And what would you say to people who are perhaps grieving the loss of a loved one?
So, the number one thing I like to tell people is, number one, that they're totally fine. Number one, and number two is that this life continues. In fact, this is the pit stop. Life went long before this, and life continues long after this. This is the pit stop. This is the going and getting gas, right? And that's what we're doing here. This is just a short pit stop for our eternal existence. And before you know it, time will come where you can be back with that loved one. You don't want to rush things. You don't want to go in the wrong way. You want to go the way that God plans it for you. But you need to embrace the love and the energy of who your loved one is. And if you really embrace them and think of them a lot, in a good way, not a hurting, sorrowful, I'm lonely way, but in a good, I love you, I miss you, and I remember these amazing things about our existence together. In that way, we can actually bring forth a strong connection with them, so that we can get our own signs and our own omens from the spirit side. Sometimes in numbers, sometimes in the 333. Sometimes in the 11. Sometimes we can be specific, and if our loved one loved birds, we can say, I want to see a cardinal feather, or I want to see a blue jay feather, something like that, or a turkey feather. We have all three out here.
Yeah, we do.
But you can ask for specific signs, and when you find them, and see them, snap a picture of it, and really feel gratitude and love in your heart for God's universe to compile enough love to make that sign come forward. And those signs do come.
Yeah.
And once you get through the healing, because it does take some time, with some time, your heart will start to heal. And as it does start to heal, it'll never be the same, but you'll still be able to heal. And as you start to heal, you'll be able to connect with that loved one through their voice in your mind.
Wow.
And you, even to a point where some people can actually hear their loved one talking to them as they're doing stuff.
I've noticed some people have that gift.
They do. All of us do. We're all radios. Just some of us turn on and some of us tune in. And some of us turn on and just randomly get stuff here and there. Some of us learn how to tune in and turn on and tune in. But all of us are antenna or radios. All of us. We can send and receive though.
Wow. What have you found that helps you tune in better to hear, I guess, I want to say God speaking to you, because I had another podcast guest call it the God voice in
the
her.
God voice, yeah.
Yeah, and I really liked that phrase. What do you do to help you tune in? Because maybe it's something we can apply.
If I did everything I knew, my spirit voice or God voice would be much stronger. I call it my guides. My guides would be much stronger than they are. But going to sacred places helps a lot. And like we were talking this morning, the most sacred place that any of us can go is in our temple, in our between our two temples. And we need to go there regularly and meditate, and we need to start building that relationship with the divine. If that relationship starts with just setting up a regular time where you're just going to sit quietly, eventually the energy will start to flow and it will start to come. And it's really important for us to seek higher frequency, because we can always ask lower frequency the same questions as we ask higher frequency. And a lot of times we get the same answers, but the version of answer we get from lower frequency will lead us on the wrong path, always. And so it's really important that we do seek higher frequency, because it's kind of like guideposts where people can be up on a guidepost. The higher you can get, the better you can see. And so the higher the frequency, the better the answer. And when an answer comes to me like from my side direction energetically, I don't trust it fully. I'll listen, but I don't trust it. I wait till it comes from above or higher frequency. And one of the things that helps me the most is to, number one, stay really hydrated. I drink a lot of water. Drink a lot of sodas too, but I shouldn't drink any sodas. Soda turns off spirit, water turns it on. So for every soda, for every soda I drink, I gotta drink 2 or 3 waters to counteract it.
Wow.
But
so it does matter what you put into your
definitely,
physical
yeah.
life.
That is so cool. Before we close, have there been any Bible verses that have become meaningful to you since your near-death experience?
I have 2 favorite scriptures. So, and one of them I had before my experience, and the other I've picked up since. Let's see here. So this is the one that I picked up since. This is Colossians or Colossians, whatever, Colossians 3:14. And over all these virtues put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. And that's one that when you go to the Hebrew version, the Hebrew version essentially could be translated as love is the most important thing to put first on top of everything. And it is the force or the power of unity between all life. And was essentially what I learned through my experience. And then of course, John 4:16. And so we know and rely on the love of God, the love God has for us. God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God and God in them. And it's kind of essentially the same principle that the universe is love. The universe is God, and it's all permeated with that loving force that was created for us to guide us and create us and shape us, but in a way that we choose that shaping. We choose that growth, and if we choose not to grow, we don't have to grow.
Right.
We have
it's
the
all
agency.
up to us.
It is.
And God takes us where we are.
Yeah.
And
we're driving our own ship. Yeah.
That is awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing this. I'll be sure to link Vinney's website, livinggodslight.com, in the show notes if you want to check that out, and it'll keep you apprised of his book that's coming out,
As
of
it
his
comes
whole
out,
experience.
yeah.
There's a whole lot more in there that we didn't even get to cover.
Yeah.
So we're just doing a little scratch here, and I'm just thankful Vinney was willing to share his story with us. And if anything, take from this that you are loved and that God loves you, and choose to love yourself, because that's really, really important.
And truly, if you love God, you're going to love you because you are a creation of God.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to today's show. If you like what you heard, subscribe so you can get your weekly dose of powerful stories of hope. I know there are many of you out there who are going through a hard time, and I hope you found useful things that you can apply to your own life in today's podcast. If you would like to access the show notes of today's show, please visit my website, storiesofhopepodcast.com. There you will find a summary of today's show, the transcript, and one of my favorite takeaways. You know, if someone kept coming to mind during today's episode, perhaps that means that you should share this episode with them. Maybe there was a story shared, or a quote, or a scripture verse that they really, really need to hear. So go ahead and share this podcast. May God bless you, especially if you are struggling, with hope to carry on and with the strength to keep going when things get tough. Remember to walk with Christ, and He will help you bear the burden. And above all else, remember, God loves you.